The poem of Valentine by Edgar Allan Poe is a riddle for the reader in which Poe uses romantic elements, repetition, allusions, and metaphors to show that the poem is a mystery, one in which the reader must solve himself. In the first two lines, the narrator compares his lover's eyes to the stars in the Gemini constellation. The poem states, "For her this rhyme is penned, whose luminous eyes, brightly expressive as the twins of Leda." This is a metaphor, saying that the woman who the narrator is in love with has eyes as beautiful as bright stars. The narrator uses this metaphor to make the allusion from the lover's eyes to the stars. The twins of Leda is a reference to the Greek myth that the Gemini star constellation is named after. In the constellation, there are two stars that shine brighter than all of the others. These stars are named Castor and Pollux, after Leda's two twin sons. Therefore, by the narrator saying that his lover's eyes are as brightly expressive as the twins of Leda, he is clearly comparing her eyes to those two stars. By comparing his lover's eyes to the nature's beauty, the narrator is using romantic elements in the poem. The next metaphor that the narrator uses is the difficulty of the riddle of the poem is compared to the old tale of Alexander the Great and the Gordian knot. Lines 3 through 6 read, "The trivialest point, or you may lose your labor, and yet there is in this no Gordian knot, which one might not undo without a saber, if one could merely comprehend the plot." The Gordian knot is an old legend in which there was a knot that was considered impossible to untie. Alexander the Great attempted to untie this knot, but was unsuccessful. He then had the idea to simply cut the knot in half with his sword. In a way, he did untie the knot, but it was not using the conventional method, but instead an easier, out-of-the-box, if you will, method. At this point in the poem, the narrator is saying that the poem is difficult to decipher but not impossible, and there is no easier way or abstract way of figuring it out. Once again, the narrator uses a metaphor to make an allusion. This time, it is between the poem and the Gordian knot. Comparing the riddle to a medieval legend like this is another example of the narrator using romantic elements to enhance the meaning of the poem. By using this metaphor, the theme of the riddle is also being supported. Later on in the poem, Poe uses repetition to help to give a clue as to who his secret lover is. In line 16, the narrator states, "And written upon the leaf where now are peering eyes, scintillating soul, there lies Perdis." Three eloquent words oft uttered in the hearing of poets, by poets, as the name is a poet's too. Here the narrator is repeating the term poet to help to give the reader the understanding that the lover that he is speaking of in the poem is another poet. The narrator is also giving a clue by stating that there are three words hidden inside the poem that make up the lover's name. This is an example of the narrator using repetition to show that the poem is a riddle for the reader. Poe uses yet another metaphor in lines 17 and 18 when he says, "Its letters, although naturally aligned, like the knight Pinto Mendez Fernando." Here, the narrator is saying that the letters of the name are naturally aligned like Mendez Pinto. Mendez Pinto is a famous Portuguese explorer who is known for lying. This is another example of Poe giving a clue to the reader using a metaphor and showing that the poem is actually a riddle. The narrator creates a very romantic tone in this poem. At numerous points throughout the piece, the narrator shows this by using romantic elements, such as medieval legends or nature. Unlike some of Poe's other poems, this does not have any Gothic elements at all. Even the title of Valentine is romantic. The narrator also says that the poem is about a lover of his. This is clearly made with romantic meaning. The playful mystery in this poem gives the reader a joyful mood. While there is a lot of mystery in the poem, which is usually a sign of dark or gothic poems, the mystery is not presented in a dark manner, but instead a light and jubilant manner. After some research, it was concluded that the name of Edgar Allan Poe's lover was Frances Sargent Osgood, a poet friend of his. Her name can be found in the poem by taking the first letter of the first line, the second letter of the second line, the third letter of the third line, and so on and so forth.